Welcome to our podcast on expanding your English vocabulary together.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in as we explore 6 expressive phrases and words today.
Today we'll cover the words and expressions kick up a fuss, lay down the law, life-threatening, make a mess, and messy to help new viewers become aware of these vocabs in our podcast. Kick up a fuss is a phrasal verb.
It means to complain loudly or make a scene about something.
She threatened to kick up a fuss if they raised her rent.
He doesn't usually kick up a fuss, even when upset.
Tourists sometimes kick up a fuss over missing reservations.
She kicked up a fuss when her luggage got lost.
Parents kick up a fuss if the babysitter arrives late.
He'll kick up a fuss if his coffee isn't hot enough.
Guests kick up a fuss over noisy neighbors.
She avoided kicking up a fuss by speaking calmly.
Customers often kick up a fuss over billing errors.
He sympathized when she kicked up a fuss about the menu.
They kicked up a fuss when the concert was delayed.
She rarely kicks up a fuss about minor mistakes.
He kicked up a fuss after finding bugs in the meal.
Tourists sometimes kick up a fuss about room upgrades.
She threatened to kick up a fuss if the service didn't improve.
He kicked up a fuss about the canceled flight.
They kicked up a fuss when the policy changed overnight.
She tried not to kick up a fuss to avoid drama.
He kicked up a fuss about the noisy construction next door.
Guests kick up a fuss when spa appointments run late.
She doesn't hesitate to kick up a fuss when cheated.
He taught his children not to kick up a fuss over toys.
They often kick up a fuss during peak holiday traffic.
She avoided kicking up a fuss by asking politely.
He kicked up a fuss about the unfair parking ticket.
Customers sometimes kick up a fuss when items go on sale after purchase.
She vowed to kick up a fuss until her complaint was resolved.
He learned that kicking up a fuss rarely speeds resolution.
Tourists kick up a fuss when promised amenities are missing.
She tries not to kick up a fuss to keep relationships smooth.
He threatened to kick up a fuss if excluded from the meeting.
She once kicked up a fuss over a misprinted book dedication.
They kick up a fuss when local events are postponed.
He realized kicking up a fuss can escalate conflicts.
She avoids kicking up a fuss by confirming details in advance.
He heard neighbors kick up a fuss about stray pets.
She vowed never to kick up a fuss without good reason.
He kicked up a fuss until the food was replaced.
Guests who kick up a fuss often get immediate attention.
That's how kick up a fuss captures loud complaints.
Lay down the law is a phrasal verb.
It means to assert authority by giving strict orders or rules.
As a parent, she often lays down the law about bedtime.
The manager laid down the law on punctuality.
He laid down the law about no phones in meetings.
She lays down the law when safety is at risk.
Coaches lay down the law during training camps.
The teacher laid down the law on plagiarism.
He laid down the law about weekend assignments.
She lays down the law regarding office attire.
Parents sometimes lay down the law on curfews.
The CEO laid down the law on expense claims.
He laid down the law about quality standards.
She lays down the law in her kitchen.
The principal laid down the law on bullying.
She lays down the law in her negotiation style.
He laid down the law during the safety drill.
She lays down the law about project deadlines.
The referee lays down the law on foul play.
She laid down the law when her rights were ignored.
He laid down the law at the staff meeting.
She lays down the law with clear email guidelines.
The landlord laid down the law on no pets.
She lays down the law with firm contracts.
He laid down the law about no smoking on campus.
She lays down the law to enforce deadlines.
The general laid down the law before the operation.
She lays down the law in her yoga classes.
He laid down the law at the family meeting.
She lays down the law when negotiating rent.
The judge laid down the law in court.
She lays down the law about respectful communication.
He laid down the law when his team missed deadlines.
She lays down the law with clear performance metrics.
The trainer laid down the law on proper form.
She lays down the law on refund policies.
He laid down the law at the board meeting.
She lays down the law in her coding style guide.
The coach lays down the law before every game.
She laid down the law when her manuscript was edited.
He lays down the law on social media use.
That's how lay down the law asserts strict rules.
Life-threatening is an adjective.
It describes something that poses a danger to one's life.
A punctured lung can be life-threatening without treatment.
He was rushed to the hospital after a life-threatening allergic reaction.
Dehydration in extreme heat can become life-threatening.
She recognized the life-threatening risk of carbon monoxide.
Severe infections can turn life-threatening quickly.
He described the life-threatening potential of the virus.
Snake bites may require antivenom to avoid life-threatening consequences.
She warned of life-threatening structural damage after the quake.
Uncontrolled diabetes can lead to life-threatening complications.
He learned CPR to manage life-threatening emergencies.
Choking hazards can be life-threatening for toddlers.
She reported life-threatening side effects from the medication.
Hypothermia is a life-threatening condition in cold water.
He shared stories of life-threatening accidents at sea.
Bleeding heavily can become life-threatening in minutes.
She recognized the life-threatening nature of her symptoms.
Severe asthma attacks can be life-threatening without help.
He described a life-threatening situation during the hike.
Electric shocks can be life-threatening at high voltage.
She wrote guidelines for life-threatening allergic reactions.
Burns covering large areas can be life-threatening.
He took first aid classes for life-threatening injuries.
A broken neck is immediately life-threatening.
She created a kit for life-threatening emergencies at home.
Heat stroke can rapidly become life-threatening if untreated.
He recounted surviving a life-threatening car crash.
Drowning is always life-threatening without rescue.
She taught about life-threatening contraindications of drugs.
Sepsis is a life-threatening body-wide reaction.
He described life-threatening flooding during the hurricane.
Brain hemorrhages can be life-threatening emergencies.
She emphasized quick action in life-threatening scenarios.
Cardiac arrest is instantly life-threatening.
He wrote about life-threatening conditions for pilots.
High-altitude sickness can be life-threatening without descent.
She described life-threatening food allergies in children.
Penetrating chest wounds are life-threatening.
He stressed awareness of life-threatening symptoms in athletes.
Internal bleeding can be life-threatening if undetected.
That's how life-threatening warns of mortal danger.
Make a mess is a phrasal verb.
It means to create disorder or untidiness in a place.
The kids made a mess with their arts and crafts supplies.
He made a mess by spilling juice on the carpet.
She warned, "Don't make a mess in the living room."
He made a mess, assembling the furniture without directions.
They made a mess of the kitchen cooking together.
She made a mess decorating her room with paint.
He made a mess storing tools without trays.
The dog made a mess digging up the flower beds.
She admonished him not to make a mess with his games.
He made a mess unloading supplies in the hallway.
They made a mess wrapping gifts without a table.
She made a mess of the workshop with wood shavings.
He forgot to cover the floor and made a mess painting.
She made a mess setting up the buffet.
They warned each other not to make a mess in the lab.
He made a mess testing code on live servers.
She made a mess of the garden planting seeds everywhere.
He made a mess pouring cement without a mold.
They made a mess of the playroom with new toys.
She made a mess of the printer with jammed paper.
He taught children not to make a mess when eating.
She made a mess assembling the tent poles.
They made a mess of the hallway with muddy boots.
He made a mess of his desk with loose papers.
She made a mess of the cake batter while mixing.
He made a mess on the patio barbecuing.
They made a mess of the garage rearranging tools.
She made a mess of the printer tray loading wrong paper.
He made a mess of the walkway with spilled gravel.
She made a mess of the study with open books everywhere.
They made a mess of the car trunk packing too quickly.
He made a mess of the office with tape and labels.
She made a mess of the files without a folder system.
He made a mess of the storage room on moving day.
They made a mess of the kitchen cabinets with Tupperware.
She made a mess of the countertop baking cookies.
He made a mess at the art studio with clay scraps.
She made a mess of the car engine attempting a fix.
They made a mess of the courtyard planting seedlings.
That's how make a mess describes creating untidiness.
Mess is both a noun and a verb.
As a noun, it means a state of disorder. As a verb, to make untidy.
His room was a complete mess after the party.
She messed up the report by deleting the wrong section.
They found a mess of cables behind the TV.
He messed around with the settings and broke the app.
The kitchen was in such a mess, they hired cleaners.
She messed up the cake by overbaking it.
The garage turned into a mess over the winter.
He messed his hair trying a new cut.
Papers created a mess on her desk every day.
She messed with the thermostat and broke the AC.
The basement was a storage mess of old furniture.
He messed up the code with a missing semicolon.
The playroom became a mess after the kids finished.
She messed around with filters and lost the photo.
Their finances were a mess until they budgeted.
He messed his speech by skipping part of the script.
Cupboards became a mess with groceries spilling out.
She messed her painting by using the wrong paint.
The campsite was left a mess by careless campers.
He messed with the engine installed the car.
The file system was a digital mess of duplicates.
She messed her makeup by dropping the palette.
Their garden was a weed mess by July.
He messed his playlist editing tracks incorrectly.
Her inbox was a mess until she organized it.
She messed up dinner by burning the onions.
The storage closet was a mess of boxes.
She messed her notes by spilling coffee.
The workshop floor was a sawdust mess.
He messed with the audio levels and distorted the track.
The living room was a toy mess after Christmas.
She messed her hairstyle by pulling too hard.
Their account records were a bookkeeping mess.
He messed the spreadsheet formulas accidentally.
The attic was a cluttered flea market mess.
She messed her presentation by skipping slides.
The yard became a debris mess after the storm.
He messed with Java code and caused errors.
The basement was a damp storage mess.
That's how mess covers both disorder and causing it.
Messy is an adjective.
It describes something untidy, disorganized, or complicated.
Her desk is always messy, with papers everywhere.
He hates messy spaghetti sauces on his shirt.
The toddler's room was charmingly messy, with toys scattered.
She found the project messy due to conflicting data.
His hair was unruly and distinctly messy after the wind.
She avoided the messy breakup by discussing issues early.
The grill became messy, with grease drippings.
He described the negotiations as messy and drawn out.
Their living room is perpetually messy on weekends.
She called the plot messy with too many subplots.
The kitchen counters were messy, with cooking utensils.
He found the codebase messy and in need of refactoring.
Her art studio was artistically messy, but inspiring.
She admitted the paperwork process was messy and slow.
The picnic area was messy after the rain.
He labeled the situation messy with legal complications.
His notebooks were always delightfully messy with doodles.
She called the debate messy with interruptions.
The garage looked messy with tools strewn about.
He said the campaign finances were messy to audit.
Her hairdo remained messy despite the styling gel.
She described the family dynamics as messy.
The bedroom was messy after the kids' sleepover.
He found the inheritance distribution messy legally.
The garden looked messy before the spring cleanup.
She called the relationship messy and undefined.
The artist's palette was gloriously messy with mixed paints.
He deemed the software messy with too many features.
Their office became messy with unfiled reports.
She admitted the divorce process was messy.
The cake decorating station got messy quickly.
He labeled the merger talks messy with conflicting interests.
The rehearsal space was messy with scattered props.
She warned that changing plans last minute is often messy.
His desk remained messy despite daily tidying attempts.
She found the plot holes made the story messy.
The workshop floor got messy with sawdust.
He said the budget negotiations were messy.
The children left the craft table messy with glitter.
That's how messy describes untidiness and complication.
That concludes our deep dive into these 6 essential English expressions and words.
We hope you feel confident using kick up a fuss, lay down the law, life-threatening, make a mess, and messy in your conversations.
Thank you for listening, and we look forward to sharing more vocabulary insights next time.
Goodbye and keep practicing every day.